I was unfortunately rear-ended and pushed into the path of a transport truck caused by a distracted driver. When I started my recovery, I didn't think it would ever end because I was just so overwhelmed with lawyers and insurance and jobs and rehab. And there was some times there that I thought, Jesus, is this ever going to end? And I had so many questions, and so there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and the victims will still have really bad days, but there's going to be a lot of good days too.
Today, I have Dawne McKay as a guest, who actually is a prior victim of a crash. She's written a book called Talk Crash to Me. She also has a crash support network group. This is After the Crash. I'm attorney Dave Craig, managing partner and one of the founders of the law firm of Craig, Kelley Faultless. I've represented people who have been seriously injured or who have had a family member killed in a semi or other big truck wreck for over 30 years. Following the wreck, their lives are chaos. Often they don't even know enough about the process to ask the right questions. It is my goal to empower you by providing you with the information you need to protect yourself and your family. In each and every episode, I will interview top experts and professionals that are involved in truck wreck cases. This is After the Crash. It's a little bit different than some of the guests we've had in the past. In the past, I've brought a variety of different people, reconstructionists, financial people, lawyers. But today, I have the great pleasure of interviewing Dawne, who actually is a prior victim of a crash. And so I'm excited because we get a look at it from the client's perspective, the person's perspective who's going through all of this. She's written a book called Talk Crash to Me, and I've read that book. It's a fantastic book for victims. It helps guide them and provides them helpful information. She also has a crash support network group that is available. You can find it on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and a variety of other places. But she started that, and it's extraordinarily helpful to people who've been through crashes and who've been through traumatic events, like on a semi-wreck or an auto wreck. And there's not enough of those. There's not enough support groups out there, and I think it's a great resource for clients. So Dawne, thank you for agreeing to be a guest.
Well, thanks for having me, David.
I think, again, the perspective, I know you are the survivor of a horrific motor vehicle crash that left you with multiple serious injuries. And as a victim, you had to navigate not only the healing process, but also the legal process.
Correct.
And so just kind of like when that first happens, I mean, obviously you're confused, you're in pain. There's a whole lot going on. Can you just talk to us a little bit about, in the beginning, what one of these victims goes through?
Oh, sure. Well, of course, it was a horrific motor vehicle crash. I was on my way to work. I was unfortunately rear-ended and pushed into the path of a transport truck caused by a distracted driver. And of course, they take you away in the ambulance, so you don't really know what's going on at first because you're in shock and you're trying to figure out, what just happened. So they transported me to a local hospital, and from there they had to take me down to a trauma hospital due to my multiple injuries. I spent a few days in the hospital, and they discharged me, even though I couldn't walk. So I definitely needed 24-hour care. So my boyfriend at the time stood up and said he would take me in to look after me because I needed the care, of course, for the recovery process. And, once you get home, you're dealing with nurses and PSWs and occupational therapists. And then all of a sudden you're dealing with a lawyer. I've never had to deal with a lawyer before. Never been in a crash like this before. So this was, a whole learning process for me. And of course, insurance on top of that. So you're not only dealing physically, you're also dealing mentally, financially, all the challenges that you face. Is all new. It was all new to me. I didn't know what was all involved, being a victim of a motor vehicle crash. So it was just a huge learning process for me. I would say it probably took maybe 4 to 5 months before I actually realized what it all entailed. Because, at first you're definitely focusing on the physical. to try to get more mobile, et cetera. And you're worried about your health. You're worried about your job. Your job's been put on hold. You're worried if you're going to lose your job and things like that. And then, of course, then you start going through the steps of the legal process and dealing with insurance. And, about maybe 5 or 6 months in, I felt alone. Like I felt like my family and friends' lives had moved on. And I felt stuck, because you are stuck, because you don't know what your future entails. Like you feel really stuck and overwhelmed, and it's a lot to take on,
And I think it's such a unique perspective for having gone through this, where, as lawyers, we sit there and we're responsible for helping people put people's lives back together through the legal process. But there's so much more to it than just the legal process. And I've got to think that initially there's just a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety, a lot of doubt,
Sure.
fear. All those things have to be things that you're going through in the very beginning.
Absolutely. The flashbacks. It took me a really long time to control that. And when I mean flashbacks, you're having nightmares, you're not sleeping well, you're in severe pain, trying to get better physically, but it's a mental challenge as well. And I would say it probably took me at least a year, because you sit and doubt yourself, like you say, what if I left a few minutes early? What if I left a few minutes later? And there was a time frame that I don't remember anything. So that played on my mind a lot, because I was trying to put the pieces back together. Well, I remember going in the first ambulance, but I don't really remember getting to the second hospital. So, your mind just continuously tends to overwhelm you because of everything that's transpired. So, of course, the post-traumatic stress is real, for sure. I have never had it before. Definitely not fun. So, I had to seek a psychologist, which I was very reluctant to do at first, because I had never seen one. But to this day, I don't know what I would have done without him, because he was a tremendous help, huge help. Yeah.
Absolutely. And my dad was a psychologist, so I'm a little biased. I know people don't like to go to psychologists, but I've seen I saw the help that he could provide people. People are skeptical. It's easy when you have a broken arm to go to an orthopedic surgeon, but
Sure.
when you've gone through such a traumatic event, it's sometimes hard for people to reach out. And sometimes people, look at you funny because they have never been to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But by God, it really, they can help you so much. And I encourage
Absolutely.
everybody to get whatever type of help it is you need, whether it's the medical doctors or the psychological or the counseling or whatever and also legal. You need a team really to help you get through these events.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, I know that I've been hired before, and families have referred me to that. They've told families to reach out to me, and I've gone to hospitals where their family members have been killed, and there are survivors that are still in the hospital. And I know when I go in there, they're just in shock. The family is not thinking about hiring a lawyer. The family is not thinking about a lawsuit. I mean, they're just in survival mode. They're trying to think what's going to happen to this child, who's going to raise this person, if it's a spouse, who's going to take care of these children.
Sure.
They're just thinking of all the other things, but getting a lawyer is not one of them. Is that
Right.
up front, was that true for you as well?
For me personally, I believe it was a police officer that had spoke to my boyfriend at the time. And he put the bug in his ear and said, do you have a lawyer? You need to get a lawyer. And at first, my boyfriend didn't understand what transpired. And he said, well, do I need a lawyer for her? Because she was at fault. And he said, no, you need to talk to a lawyer because of the circumstances. She wasn't at fault, but you need to talk to a lawyer right away. So the police officer was kind enough to put the bug in his ear. And I believe he called from the hospital, if I remember right, to set up a lawyer. Now, I wouldn't have known to do that because I was, very highly medicated and, kind of out of it.
Yeah.
So I would never even have thought to call a lawyer. But there's a lot of people, I guess we'll get to my group, but there's a lot of people, other victims that I speak to, they'll reach out to me because first of all, they don't know what a personal injury lawyer is, and they're not sure if they should get one. You know, and you're talking a few months after it's all transpired and they've already kind of dealt with insurance. And I think, oh my gosh, they don't realize that they should be contacting a lawyer as quickly as possible. But,
Yeah.
you know, so trying to spread the word and get the awareness out there. But
Well, and a friend of mine says, you know, he likes to say, you don't know what you don't know. And so if you've never been through this process, you don't know. The insurance companies and the trucking companies, they know. I mean, they've been through this multiple times. They know how to protect their clients. They know how to protect their insured. They know how to protect their money, but the victims don't. I mean, it's the first time. And when I go in, you know, and meet people, I mean, very fortunate. It's very often it's a family member or a friend who's looking out for the victim. And they are the ones who tell these people, look, you better get somebody while you're getting better. You need to have somebody looking out for your legal interest.
right.
And I think in your book, you touch on that and Talk Crash to Me. You talk about how important it is to get an attorney to represent your interest. And I think, and you may not have known this in the very beginning, you know, what is a personal injury lawyer? How do they work? Do they make me pay? I mean, were you familiar with our profession?
I was familiar to a certain degree, and I was aware of the contingency fee. That was something new over the last few years. So I knew that you didn't have to pay up front. So I was familiar with that. I believe my boyfriend was aware of that too. But there are still numerous people out there that don't realize that personal injury lawyers are there for your benefit to help you get through the process. Like, from the moment I went home, the lawyer looked after me. The law clerk set up everything at home. You know, she was doing daily check-in phone calls with me, you know, not necessarily talking to me, but talking to my boyfriend. Is there anything else that she needs? And, you know, the OT is going to come tomorrow. How else can I help? What else can we do? You know, so they were the first, I guess, support system, the positive support system that I had very quickly after after that crash. But yeah, they were extremely helpful. I don't think we would have been able to do all that on our own, you know, to pick up a phone and try to find a nurse to come in. I had to have nursing, you know, daily for 2 months due to a horrific seatbelt wound. But I tell you that they took care of all that for me. You know, they were really good that way.
I think it's important that people understand that. So a personal injury lawyer, they typically do not charge you unless they make a recovery on your behalf. So they don't make you pay as you go. And they, not only that, they advance the expenses. I don't know any personal injury lawyer who does this for a living that doesn't advance the expenses as they go along. So that as the victim, you don't really have to pay money out of your pocket, and you're entitled to and you receive the representation without having to worry about that part of it.
Right. Absolutely. It's a big relief. It's a big relief to have that, to not have to be able to put your trust in the right lawyer, for sure, to be able to look after that. Mm-hmm.
And in your book, you talk a little bit about how you know, what you should look for, what some questions you should ask your lawyer. And I encourage people, you know, it's an important decision because you may spend years working with this lawyer in this law firm. And it's, you know, a catastrophic injury, you're not going to heal overnight. So it's going to take time. And so making sure you're comfortable with the lawyers and that you have the right lawyers is extraordinarily important. Unfortunately, I see people who don't pick the right lawyers and then they pay a price for that. I mean,
Yes.
you're suffering, you know, and the last thing you want to do is make things worse by picking the wrong law firm.
Correct.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the questions you think that are important for victims to understand when they're selecting a law firm.
Well, when they're selecting a law firm, you know, they need to do their research right away, whether the victim, if they can do it, or a family member. You certainly have to do your research. And Google is a great tool to use. You know, look at their reviews, see if they've, you know, what their testimonials are. If they're trial lawyers, in case your crash has to go through to a trial. A lot of people think that, they have to get the biggest law firm and the most well-known, or the one that you see on the television commercial. And that's not necessarily the case. I had a very small law firm, and it worked out quite well. He did a fantastic job, and I'm very pleased and I'm still in touch with him. This is going on 9 years now that I'm still in touch with that law firm. But I just need to make it clear that you don't necessarily have to go to the biggest city to find the biggest law firm. And there's a comfort level. You need to find someone, almost like you would have to do an interview, of course. Ask them the right questions, such as if they've gone to trial, and find the comfort level. If something feels off, or they're not returning your call right away, or you have to follow your gut, I guess, if I can say that. You have to. The lawyer has to have your best interests at heart, not just the claim, not just the case. Like, you have to build a good relationship with them. Like you say, it could go on for several years. And if you get off to a rocky start, then that's, you need to jump on that and make sure you're going to get the right representation right away.
I mean, I think that it's important for, just like you said, and in the book, I mean, it's important for your lawyer to have the specific knowledge. Do they know about how to handle a personal injury case? They have to have the experience. Have they actually handled a case like yours? There's all kinds of different cases. I do a lot of semi-tractor trailer crashes, and the semi wrecks are different. Big truck wrecks are different than car wrecks or slip and falls or whatever. And
Sure.
so you need somebody who has the knowledge and the experience. And also the resources. I mean, if you're fighting a multi-million-dollar case, the lawyer has to be able to advance expenses and hire the reconstructionist and hire the right people. And we're two of the lawyers in my firm are board certified in truck wreck law, and that's kind of a vetting process. That someone else has checked us out and made sure that we know truck wreck law. And so, like you said, you can go on Google, you can look at things, and you can find out, is somebody board certified? Are they been ranked by their peers, by Martindale Hubbell or super lawyers or whatever? You can look it up and see how good is this law firm, or how good is this lawyer. But then I thought you had a great point in your book, which a lot of people don't know unless they've been through the process, which is, are you the one handling my case?
Right.
Absolutely. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of law firms, how do I explain this? Larger law firms, they take on so many cases that you're not going to be able to get the personal attention that you desperately need as you're recovering, and they will pass the claims on to other lawyers. And as a client, you're not necessarily aware of that. So that's when the problems start happening, that you start calling and they're not returning your calls, et cetera, et cetera. Then you need to find out if that personal injury lawyer is actually representing you, or if they've put your claim to someone else. And it happens, unfortunately, quite a lot.
Yeah, and now there's even, I see law firms that are marketing, and again, you touch on it in the book, is that there's law firms out there that market. They have television commercials, they have billboards, they have Google ads or whatever, and they're highly placed in their rankings on Google. And they never have even the intention of handling the case in the very beginning. They're basically marketing firms, I mean, really, and they're going to get that case and refer it out to a different law firm.
Correct. Yeah, and that's really unfortunate for the client, right from the get-go. It's just that the client desperately needs the support, and only to deal with one lawyer, and the lawyer that's looking after your case. Because we're already confused to begin with as a victim, and we're already overwhelmed with all of our appointments. And that's adding more fuel to the fire and more confusion along the way of then realizing the lawyer is not the lawyer you thought was representing you in the first place. So you have to be very, very careful and very vigilant to make sure that you're getting the right lawyer.
Like you said, interviewing people, asking them the questions. Are you the lawyer that's going to handle my case? What's your team? Who's the team on, what team? Because one lawyer is not going to do everything, but you're going to have paralegals, you're going to have a variety of people who's going to work the case. But I would encourage victims to interview the lawyer and meet the team, and then ask what their role is going to be and how actively they're going to be involved. But be leery of somebody who just takes in your case and then refers it out to somebody you don't even know,
Right.
because you don't know then what you're getting.
Correct. Correct.
Well, let's talk a little bit about treatment. One of the things that I like that you wrote in your book, and I know you push out, is you really kind of have to be an advocate for yourself.
You do.
When you're going through this process. Talk a little bit about what you mean by that.
Well, like I said before, I found that friends and families' lives had moved on. A lot of people go back to work that might have been caring for you, and you're home alone dealing with all of your different services that are coming in to help you. If something doesn't feel right to you, you have to bring it to their attention. And if you feel that you're still not being heard, you have to keep pushing it. I had an issue shortly after my crash with my eyesight. And I was putting it off for a little while, so I had to take the initiative to get an appointment with an optometrist, because I wasn't sure, because I suffered from a traumatic brain injury, so I wasn't sure if that had to do with my head injury, because with my eyes being messed up. And when I saw the optometrist, he actually did a test on me, and I don't know what the name of the test was, to make sure that I didn't have a brain bleed, because he knew my head was hurt in that crash. And he had come back and he said, I found a shadow. I'm going to, I don't want to alert you, but I have to do the test again. So he was genuinely concerned, and he was very thankful that I advocated for myself. So, you know what? I'm not feeling good. My eyesight's off. Something's going on. I better get it checked out. So anything that feels off, you really have to advocate for yourself and speak up. Absolutely. For anything, even if it sounds minimal, it could lead to something that down the road you might be, regretting not pushing the issue. And if you feel you're not being heard, you just have to keep pushing the issue and pushing it until you get a resolution. Because, the physical aspect is the most important, and mentally, of course, yeah, you really have to advocate for yourself. If you don't have, like I say, family members and friends' lives might move on. So you have to look after yourself. Some top priorities: look after your recovery. Like, every day matters. So if something changes, you should definitely look into it.
I think that's important for people to realize, is that, and I think sometimes where people are intimidated, we talked about lawyers, they're intimidated by picking a lawyer, but they're also intimidated by their doctors. I mean, sometimes people have gone their whole life and been pretty healthy. And then all of a sudden, without them being at fault, suddenly their life has changed.
Sure.
And when you're going to these doctor's office, sometimes people just are kind of quiet. We don't, I always tell clients, don't exaggerate, but don't minimize. Be sure you tell them everything, because if they don't know everything, they can't make the right diagnosis and treatment plans.
Correct.
So you have to be honest, and you have to tell people everything, and don't assume that something is not meaningful,
right?
Because it might be.
Yes, and it's unfortunate, because a lot of crash survivors hear over and over again, well, your motor vehicle crash was 6 months ago, you should be over it. Yeah. And they hear that constantly. I hear it from everyone in my group saying, I can't take it, because a lot of people don't believe me. They think a year and a half I should be recovered and I should be going back to work, et cetera, et cetera. And it's sad that some people feel that way, because a lot of the injuries could be invisible. So you might look okay, like I look okay today. I had a shower and I did my hair, but nobody really knows how I slept last night, or if I'm sitting here in pain right now, because we're going on 9 years now. So you have to train yourself and learn how to cope with, your own coping mechanisms with the chronic pain, et cetera. But it's really unfortunate that if a lot of people don't see visibly that you're hurt, they're just going to assume that you're just fine. And that, if you're saying something hurts or you're complaining, well, that can't be true, because you're fine. Look at you, but they're not living in your body. So even though we look okay, it's not fair to judge people. If you're saying you're not well, then you're not well,
Right.
know?
Well, I think that's particularly true in the area of traumatic brain injury, because with a traumatic brain injury, you don't always see it. You don't have to have a bleed. You can have a brain injury without it showing up on a scan. And you look at somebody and they may physically be able to get around or move around, but oftentimes they're not the same person that was in a wreck. I have family members that talk to me all the time about, I love this person. I mean, this family member, I love them, but it's not the same person that was in that car before the wreck. And that's hard to see. And then if you're not somebody who is a family member who knew somebody before, then you don't have any idea what the difference is. This is really a different person.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's sad, very sad to hear that. But again, you need your family's support. So if we're not the same person that we were before the crash, then you kind of have to accept that. You have to work with that, find the good in it, and bring the good out in the victim. If the victim's hearing you say, well, you're just not the same person, and what's wrong with you, or bringing negativity into the mix, it's just not going to help a victim trying to recover at all. So those kind of comments should be, I guess, be said in private, and the victim shouldn't be aware of that, because we're all trying our best to find the new us, so to speak, after a crash. And, we want our lives to be like we were right before the crash too, but unfortunately, sometimes it just doesn't work out that way.
Well, and it doesn't mean the new person can't be an extraordinarily great person. I mean,
right.
You have found a calling that you probably wouldn't have found had you not been through the wreck. And because of this wreck, which is, I wouldn't wish on anybody, but you now are helping so many people through your book and through your network that just wouldn't have happened. And so I think rather than judging what was there and not what is here, I agree with you is that, and I love that, and the positivity in your book, which is focus on the good, focus on who you are today.
Sure. It's very, very important. And I appreciate the compliment there. Yeah, I am helping quite a few people. And the reason I actually started the support group online is because I found that there wasn't anywhere I could reach out to someone else. I was sitting there one day on the couch a few months into my recovery. I thought, I really need to speak to someone that's gone through the same things as me. There's got to be some kind of a support group. And I started doing research, and I was like gobsmacked that there wasn't anything. There was only one, but they had to have a maximum amount of people in order to do an in-person support group. And I thought, well, this isn't right. So I thought, I'm going to go on and create my own group. And within, I think, 10 minutes, a gentleman joined my group, and he had just been in a terrible truck crash, and he was worried about his family. And then we started talking. And I thought, this is wonderful. Like, he's telling me what's on his mind. I'm telling him what's on my mind. And I thought, this is fabulous. And now I've met somebody that, because sometimes you doubt yourself or you second guess yourself. And it's so therapeutic just to meet someone and talk to somebody, whether in person or online, that has gone through the same recovery as you. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think for people, so often, again, they've never gone through this process. They probably don't know anybody who actually has gone through this process.
Right.
And so I think, a crash support network and groups and organizations like that, at least they have somebody they know, okay, we're not the only one.
Absolutely. Because a lot of people the majority of us feel very alone, because that's how I felt. Even though I had fantastic support, I still felt alone. It wasn't that I felt like I was a burden. I just felt like I was holding so much in that only another person that went through it could understand. Because, you kind of think about your family and friends, they can only hear it for so long because they continue on with their lives. And you're like, I don't want to talk about this every day. I don't want to, every day, And so you kind of, you take a step back, and then that's what I did. And then I thought, well, geez, I'm going to have to speak to someone else. And as soon as I started doing that, like, everything completely changed, and I started getting more members and everything. And I felt, now I've found, even if it was 2 or 3 people, I felt relief that, yes, I can talk to these people now. I don't have to say the same thing every day. And, when everybody else is having a good day and I might be having a bad day, I now can go to my tribe that's also having a bad day,
And I think that, and you've touched on it. I mean, it's just human nature that when something like this happens at first, there's an outpouring of support. There's people bringing meals. There's people that are supporting and talking and coming and checking on you and helping in any way they can. But as time goes on, and which is, I mean, in every case where there's been a serious injury or even a death of a key family member, the breadwinner or whatever, the mother, the mother or the father, who, either one of them, if they're the ones that bring the money into the family or they're the ones that provide the support to the children, whatever. I mean, it takes time, and the healing process isn't fast. The healing process is different for every person. And the people, your friends and your family, even with the best of intentions, don't come around as much. They're
Right.
not helping as much. And I think that's, sometimes I see, and I tell my clients ahead of time, first of all, try to find a support group. But secondly, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. And I think you have to be prepared for the long haul.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not a quick recovery. And you're on point there that it's just human nature, I guess, that, a few months in, people do start slowly disappearing. I lost friendships. It's not a pleasant experience to go through. And I think a lot of people need to realize when you are recovering from I'm not even going to say horrific, I'm just going to say a motor vehicle crash in general with injuries. A lot of people need to realize it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of patience. And they just have to continue to be as supportive as they can, and that they should not disappear, because that doesn't help. That it just makes the situation even worse, because then, you tend to get upset about that as you're trying to recover, so please don't give up on us, I'll say. And recovery does take a long time. And unfortunately, if someone hasn't experienced it firsthand, they're not going to understand it as much, I guess, if I can say that. That's the only way to describe it, is if they don't, if they haven't been through it firsthand, they don't realize how long of a recovery it takes, for sure. Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the other things that you touch on in the book, and I found very helpful, is maybe some advice to family members, because not unlike, so the victim, it's the first time the victim's going through this, but it's also the first time their friends and family are going through it. And you give some great tips on some things you should do and some things you shouldn't do. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, when it comes to the family members, I know a lot of family members will get upset or disappointed if we have to say no to a visit. We go through good days and we go through really bad days, and it's not our fault. Half the time, if someone's canceling a visit, it's not because we want to, it's because we have to. And I think a lot of family members and friends don't understand that it's actually not our fault. Sometimes they think it's intentional if we're canceling, and that's not the case. It's just because we've had a bad day. We were up all night. And we're not functionable enough to be able to get in the shower like other people might just jump in the shower and get ready and jump in the car. It's not as easy for us, especially even when I say a car, it's not as easy anymore just to jump in a car and to go visit a friend type of thing. So I would say to family members, if we have to cancel, it's not our fault. And if they could be a little bit more understanding. And family members, they definitely don't give up on us, because a lot of family members and friends give up on us, and we need you. I would speak for every victim out there that even though we're canceling 2 or 3 times because we're not up to it, we still need you. Don't give up on us, because we really do need that support. I think the family members and friends just have to be a little bit more understanding. So I think a lot of people think, oh, within 6 months or a year, she's going to be just fine. And they have to understand it's not like that. It takes a really long time. And sometimes we don't even recover 100%. I think about a year and a half into my recovery for rehabilitation, my doctor took me aside and said, "You've reached a plateau now." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And she said, "That's all we can do for you. Now you can still come and we can help you get the rehab that you need, chiro or massage or things like that to help ease the chronic pain." But she said that, you've reached a plateau now, which means that this is it. Like, we have to figure out how you're going to live like this now, and I thought, oh my gosh, and that was a year and a half in where I was told that very unfortunate news. And then as you go, like I say, you learn as you go what works and what doesn't, and just to deal with the pain and the issues that are involved. And sometimes a lot of survivors never recover 100%. So we're always fighting. We'll be continuously fighting for some of them. Some victims continuously fight right till the very end, years and years down the road. So.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things you had mentioned, which I hadn't even thought about, but I thought was great advice, was just not just don't drop in on the victims. So just, sometimes we don't think about it, say, okay, like, if it's a friend or a family, we might just drop in and see how they're doing. But you recommend against that. Why is that?
Well, I'll start with the hospital visit first. When you're in the hospital, especially if it's within the first 48 hours, 72 hours, people tend to want to get there as soon as possible to be by your side. And we understand that, and we want you to be there, but it's a busy time. The trauma surgeon's in and out. I had an orthopedic surgeon. I had nurses taking blood. It seemed like every 20 minutes. And then I had x-rays every hour. And it's really, really hectic the first few days when you're in a trauma hospital. So it's not always the appropriate time. And I know family members and friends mean well, but, I would definitely recommend maybe to connect with another family member and say, would it be okay if I stopped by? Is there anybody there? Because when you're actually in the trauma hospital at first, I didn't even realize who was there and who wasn't. So even though I'm thankful if someone's there, I was so busy and overwhelmed and highly medicated, I didn't even know if anybody was there or not. When you're at home, it might not be the best time. It might not be convenient for the victim. So I tend to speak a lot about making sure that it's the right time for the victim. You could be having, 2 or 3 different rehabilitation people coming into the home. You could be right in the middle of a procedure that you might not want your friend or family member to be involved in, or have to go into another room. You might be so injured that your couch has been your life for the last week. And then to have a family, you don't want to interrupt when a procedure is being taken place. And then, to put the victim out to have to go into another room, things like that. So unexpected visits for a survivor, I wouldn't recommend, because it adds way too much more pressure, because then you tend, as a victim, your main focus should be on yourself. And if, within the first couple of weeks after surviving a crash like that, if you have somebody visiting, you tend to then put the tension on them, when in reality, you need to really focus on yourself, physically, mentally, financially. And like you say, kids and family and the sole breadwinner, like, there's a lot to deal with. It's not just a matter of, like, a lot of people say, well, it could have been worse and you're so lucky to be alive. And yeah, I'm very lucky that I'm alive. It could have gone a different way. But at the same time, this is a lot. It's very overwhelming what you have to deal with. And yes, I'm thankful that I'm here, but at the same time, it's quite a challenging process to go through the recovery challenge there. Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of clients tell me that. And I've actually talked to psychiatrists and psychologists about it, that it's very common for people to say, you're very lucky. You're lucky to be alive. And unfortunately, and people mean well when they say that,
Sure.
but one part is subconsciously reinforces that you almost died or you could have died. And so that's not a healthy thing for people. It's a constant reminder that they almost died or they could have died, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And secondly, they've been lucky if they wouldn't have been in a wreck. I mean, that's what really, I mean, if you think about it, it's not lucky to be in a wreck.
No.
It's not lucky to have survived a wreck, because that means you were in a wreck.
Right.
Serious injuries. And so I think people mean well. I get that. I understand that. It's not something I say because I have represented for over 35 years people like yourself. And that's just not necessarily the most appropriate thing to say.
Right. And there's another thing actually that I just thought of is that, and I think I mentioned that in my book as well for family members and friends, when you're involved in a lawsuit, the last thing that you want to ask the victim is, well, what's going on with the lawsuit? What's going on? Are they going to settle? When are they going to settle? Because I could be having the most awesome day and feeling good and had a good night's sleep, not thinking about the crash, not thinking about my therapy that I'm having. And then as soon as somebody would mention that, then it brought me right back. And then, of course, then you tend to think about, you go back to the crash and you think about the lawsuit and your job and et cetera. So, yeah, a lot of people ask me that. And I would highly recommend, if you can, to not ask that. And I know they mean well because they want to make sure that you're looked after because you were terribly hurt with multiple injuries and there was somebody to blame, so to speak, with whether it was a reckless driver or, someone's usually at fault. When it comes to a motor vehicle crash. And I know they want the best for you, but at the same time, asking that kind of brings a victim back to the day of, when you ask things like that.
And same thing's true with, when will you be able to go back to work, or when will you be healed? When will you be better? Because, if you might ask somebody that, so when are the doctors telling you you're going to be fixed, you're going to be okay? And if they just went through like what you talked, where the doctor says you've plateaued and you're not going to get any better, that's a tough, and it's a tough thing. And so my experience has been with families, the victims, when they want to talk to you about those things, they'll talk to you about them.
Right.
But it's better that you let them volunteer that information than ask. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. 100%. For sure.
Yeah. I think that, it's important for victims to understand that things will get better. I've seen really bad results or bad things happen to people. And, there's times when they just don't know whether it's going to get better or not. With time, I read a book once, I think it was a pastor, Schuler, wrote, tough times never last, but tough people do. And I think that it's important for victims not to give up. And to understand that someday it's going to get better. Mm-hmm. Maybe not all the way better, maybe not the same, but it's going to be better than what it is today.
Right. Absolutely. Amen on that. Yeah. I know when I started my recovery, I didn't think it would ever end because I was just so overwhelmed with lawyers and insurance and jobs and rehab, and there was some times there that I thought, Jesus, is this ever going to end? And I had so many questions and, so there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and, the victims will still have really bad days, but there's going to be a lot of good days too. And it will come. So, I would say 6 months after my crash, I wish somebody had told me that. And I will tell you that nobody really told me that it was going to get better. If anything, I felt like I was drowning in just so many different aspects of my life. My life completely changed in a matter of seconds. And, from the moment that happened, it spiraled, that your life definitely gets put on hold. And you just have to remain strong, and it will get better. It's going to take some time, but it will get better. And like you say, every recovery is different, but they'll get there. Everybody will get there eventually. It's just going to take some time. Absolutely.
One of the interesting things that, I think one of the things that helps you get better is talking to people like folks that are in your support group, so that you know that, okay, this is not, I'm not the only one
That's
out there.
Yeah, because a lot of people, they thank me right away. The majority of them thank me and say, I'm so glad to have found your group. I wish I had found you sooner. So they had been suffering, not being able to let out their emotions. And it could be just something as simple as, I'm going for an insurance medical assessment next week, and I have to be there all day. Has anybody else gone through that? Does anybody have any tips for me? How should I handle it? Some of them are very, very simple questions, and some of them are very, precise. Like I have to go for discoveries. I don't know what to do, or I can't get a hold of my lawyer, or, anything from the crash itself to the injuries, to the legal process, to the insurance process, and we have people in the group globally from all over the world. But, motor vehicle crashes happen all over the world. So it doesn't matter, like myself, if you live in Canada, if you live in the States, or if you live in Australia, the rules of the road, or the insurance process, and the legal process might be a bit different, but every motor vehicle crash is all around the world. So to bring us all together, we try to help each other as much as we possibly can. So, and it's more of a peer support. So when I first started the group, I would send out daily inspirations to try to get everybody speaking, et cetera, to get a peer support group going. And now it's worked out that way, probably within the last year and a half, that, if somebody writes something for advice, within 5 or 10 minutes, they might get 15 to 20 comments. So it's wonderful, very caring, empathetic environment. It's a private group that you have to ask to join. So I guess I could say what stays in the group, what goes on in the group stays in the group, so to speak. And the peer support is amazing. We don't allow any pictures, any photos of the motor vehicle crash, or even the injuries, because there's a lot of people suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. So we don't want to add unnecessary triggers. So it's more or less just texting, but not texting, but just speaking to each other, typing back and forth, almost like a chat room, I guess. And so I'm very proud the way it's turned out, that it kind of runs itself now. I'm still in there, and I approve posts, and I comment, and I post certain things in there. But I'm very proud of the people that are the members of the group for taking the initiative to welcome people and start the conversation going. So it's worked out quite well.
Tell people how they might find you.
Okay, so the Crash Support Network group is on Facebook. So it's a private group on Facebook, and it's called the Crash Support Network group. And I also have a website, crashsupportnetwork.com. And if victims go on there, they can find the link to the Facebook group. I'm also blogging about my personal experience as a survivor. And I also have a quarterly newsletter called Sharing Our Recovery, which is a fantastic newsletter for victims and survivors of crashes to sign up for and subscribe, because it's has very highly informative articles that they can all relate to. Yeah, and that's all found on the crashsupportnetwork.com.
And tell people how they might find this book.
Yes, I'm going to get it back to you.
Yeah, it's an awesome book.
Thank you.
And it's easy to read, I found it helpful enough that we're actually going to give it to clients of ours, so that they can again look at it from perspective. Because what I find is, as lawyers, we've been through this in 35 years. I can't tell you how many clients I've represented. I can't tell you how many clients I currently represent. I have a better idea of that than I do how many total. But the reality is, we're busy helping people, going through the process, protecting them. But we don't look at it from the perspective, at least not all lawyers look at it from the perspective of the client. I really try to. I really have done a lot. I've written books. I put out podcasts. I try to help people, give them information and knowledge. But so many lawyers don't. So many lawyers don't. They just want to you're grateful. You should be grateful you have me as your lawyer. I'll take care of your lawsuit, and you just worry about getting better. And so it's nice to have sources like this book to hand out to clients and say, hey, look at it from a client's perspective, a victim's perspective. So tell folks how you might find this book.
Yeah, so my book, Talk Crash to Me, is available for purchase on Amazon. Okay. Yeah, and I'm getting great reviews. A lot of survivors, the majority of them are saying it's a giant hug that they felt they needed. And a lot of them are saying that they wish they had this book at the start of their recovery. So I took that into account when I wrote it. And this was actually during the start of the pandemic that I never thought I'd write a book, but I thought, I need a little bit of a distraction here with everything that's going on in the world. And so I thought, well, I think I'm going to start sitting down and put something together, and something that would be beneficial at the start of a survivor's recovery. So this is a book that I genuinely wish somebody had handed to me when I started my recovery. So then most importantly, it's so important to me to let victims and survivors know that they're not alone, that there is people out there just like you going through the same thing. So I'm hoping with the book, I will help survivors feel less alone, and, the little tips and advice along the way, and give them a kind of a little bit of a booster that there's hope at the end of the dark tunnel, so to speak, that it's coming. Yeah.
Well, thank you for writing it. I really appreciate it on behalf of my clients and other victims. Why don't you tell us a little bit about as far as what's important for what you believe is important for survivors of serious wrecks or auto crashes to know?
Sure. If anybody out there has been in a motor vehicle wreck, I would say the first thing is to seek medical attention as soon as possible. It's very important. A lot of people tend to think they just have a minor injury and go back to their daily activities, but it is crucial that they get checked out by a medical professional. The next step would speak to an attorney that specializes in personal injury law. I would recommend doing the research on the law firm, Google their reviews, see what their experience is, how many clients they've done in the past, etc. Make sure that you have a rehabilitation team in place, because that's crucial. You need all the help and support that you can get physically to get you back to where you once were. I would also recommend not to rush your recovery, because you'll need time. You need to find your support system as well. It's really important that you have support throughout your recovery. And I would say expect the overwhelming days, but there will be a lot of good days too. And crash survivors definitely need to stay strong through their recovery.
And would you agree that it's really important that all that combines together to increase your odds of having a successful recovery? Having the right lawyers, having the right medical team, having the right rehabilitation team, and having the right support group. Wouldn't you agree that all together is extraordinarily important for victims of auto crashes?
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll be overwhelming with the appointments and dealing with all these medical appointments and dealing maybe perhaps with lawyers or for the very first time, but every appointment is crucial. And there's going to be tiring days where crash survivors, will be tired and overwhelmed and not feeling up to these appointments. But I can't stress it enough that every appointment is crucial to your recovery.
And I think one of the important things, and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, is because you have personal knowledge. You've been through this. It gives your voice credibility, where someone who hasn't been through this doesn't have the same perspective. And I know that your particular crash is sensitive to you, and it's I'm sure, even though it's been as many years as it's been, it's still emotionally traumatic. But I want to give you the opportunities, or anything you would like to share about your specific wreck with this audience.
Right. It is still quite emotional for me. And, I'm going on 9 years now. But I will share that, I was on my way to work, sitting at a full stop, waiting to make a left-hand turn, when I was rear-ended by an SUV going at an extremely high rate of speed and pushed into the path of a transport truck. From there, it left me with multiple injuries, including a horrific seatbelt wound, a traumatic brain injury. I was transported to a local hospital, but from there they had to instantly transport me down to a trauma hospital where I spent a few days in 24-hour care. And the crash was caused by a distracted driver. So I'm trying to actually bring awareness to that as well. It's really important to keep your eyes on the road at all times, because unfortunately, I'm an example of what can happen when someone is distracted behind the wheel of a vehicle. It can be horrific, and it could potentially be fatal. So,
and I can't disagree more. I mean, I agree more that over the years I've seen, I used to see a lot of drunk drivers and a lot of wrecks caused by drunk drivers, and there still are wrecks out there by impaired drivers. But certainly the distraction and the distracted driver, I see far more wrecks every single week
right.
that occur because of distraction. And the distraction can be from a variety of things. Cell phones certainly are a big cause of distracted driving. And people are using their cell phones now for GPS, for radio, for internet, for all kinds of different things, which is very dangerous. And so whether they're using for their cell phone, whether they're using for some other purpose, it can be extraordinarily dangerous. But there are also people eating, people reading, people doing all kinds of things, even carrying on conversations with multiple people in a car. There's so many different forms of distraction, and they're all dangerous.
Right. Absolutely. And it's life-changing. So, even though crash survivors, survive horrific motor vehicle crashes like that, it's life-changing. And that phone call or that hamburger behind the wheel can certainly wait. And, I think people need to be aware of the consequences when you're not fully attentive to the wheel of your vehicle that you're driving. It can wait. It can certainly wait.
Well, and I know, and we mentioned earlier that, or we mentioned as well that, we've seen that. We see distracted drivers, but it affects both people. It affects the victims, but I don't think people realize too, it also affects the people who caused the wreck. Nobody sets out to be dangerous and to hurt or kill somebody. Most of the time they're just not thinking about it.
Right.
And so, certainly it doesn't affect the people who caused the wrecks as much as the victims, but it does affect everybody. Everybody's lives are turned upside down. And so you really should think about it, because it's not only going to affect their lives, but it's going to affect your lives.
Sure. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we found, I have the distracted driving machines that we started using after one of my clients was killed by a distracted driver. And so we use those to educate kids, because I want children to know, and kids going through driver's ed, we provide them the driver's ed classes. I want them to understand, because what they think is that, young people who are driving, they think that they can handle the distractions and they're an exception, that they're not going to wreck because they're got some superhuman skills.
Yes.
The great thing about the distracted driving machines is that it shows them they can't get through the course without wrecking. And what has happened is that the reason they believe that they can get through it successfully is that they have driven and they have used their phone or they have been distracted and nothing bad happened. But that's just because there wasn't anybody slowing down or stopping or pulling out in front of them.
Sure.
And
absolutely.
I think I agree with you. I think that the more education we can give to that, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic what you're doing with those, what you're doing for the distracted drivers there. Yeah.
Well, I've seen way too many clients that have lost loved ones or who have been seriously injured by distracted drivers. And so something has to be done. And just ticketing people isn't enough. Because some of the police are hesitant to enforce those tickets. They're hard to prove what you were doing in the wreck.
Right.
So I think awareness is far better strategy.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, what else? Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about or mention?
Well, actually, I have a mascot for the Crash Support Network, and his name is Survivor Davis. And he's actually an Instagram star. So he hosts Friday Focus every week on Instagram, and he shares inspirational and motivational messages for the crash survivors. And Survivor Davis is also their biggest fan. So he wears an important message, actually, Davis. And when you break that down, it's survivors will discover that they are amazing, valued, inspiring, and strong. So he carries a very important message, and he's a great mascot and a great friend, actually. So if anybody wants to follow him on Instagram, I'd certainly recommend that, because I kind of make it fun at the same time. So it's not only just Friday Focus, it's little adventures here and there that he'll be out sharing awareness. And so I would certainly recommend anyone to follow him. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's fantastic. So I've seen him multiple times. So I follow him. So I hope other people will too.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, he's a good help. So, and people just love him. They get a kick out of him. And, every week it's a different message. And, he's always cheering every survivor on. So.
Well, fantastic. Was there anything else that you think that you would like to add that we haven't talked about, or we haven't covered during this podcast?
Well, I think in closing, I just want to say that I created the Crash Support Network. It's a highly informative and helpful resource for crash survivors. So it's been created by a crash survivor myself for other crash survivors. And my message is, if you or a loved one has been in a motor vehicle wreck, I encourage you to look at my website, which is www.crashsupportnetwork.com, and to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, because I constantly, I'm highly engaged with the followers, sending lots of important information out. And to purchase my book, Talk Crash to Me, What to Expect After Surviving a Motor Vehicle Collision and How to Manage Your Recovery, which is available on Amazon. The crash support is here for you, and you're not alone. And please always remember that you can do this. It's going to take a little while. Every crash survivor, their recovery is different, and it's going to take a while, and just hang in there. You will get there, and the Crash Support Network welcomes you to our group. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again, and thanks for everything you're doing for the victims of auto crashes and other types of crashes. It's extraordinarily important work, and I'm glad someone's out there looking out for their interests.
Thank you.
This is David Craig, and you've been listening to After the Crash. If you'd like more information about me or my law firm, please go to our website, ckflaw.com. Or if you'd like to talk to me, you can call 1-800-ASK-DAVID. If you would like a guide on what to do after a truck wreck, then pick up my book, Semi-Truck Wreck, a guide for victims and their families. This is available on Amazon, or you can download it for free on our website, ckflaw.com.